Okay, let's dive into this explainer and make it actionable. Welcome, everyone. Now, if you're an educator, an instructional designer, or a curriculum specialist, well, you know the feeling all too well, right? You're handed this massive, incredibly dense, bureaucratic curriculum guide, and somehow you're expected to transform that towering stack of paper into engaging, safe, and effective daily lesson plans for your students. Honestly, it can feel a bit like trying to translate a foreign language while building a house at the exact same time. But today, we're going to fix that. We are going to master the exact process of taking the strengthened senior high school curriculum for electrical systems installation and breaking it down into bite-sized, truly teachable moments. So here is our roadmap for our macro to micro journey today. First, the electrical curriculum framework. Second, content versus performance standards. Third, we'll focus on fire alarms. Fourth, unpacking learning competencies. And finally, number 5, the step-by-step process. All right, let's jump into section 1, the electrical curriculum framework, from broad goals to specific tracks. When we look at the instructional design framework here, you'll immediately see those 3 key pillars circling the center: responsive, relevant, and reflective. Now, this isn't just fluffy educational jargon. This is an absolute mandate. It basically means our teaching has to adapt to actual industry needs. It has to matter in the real world, and it has to allow students to truly internalize their skills. And you can see how this grand philosophy maps directly onto the grade 11 and 12 technical professional track for electrical system installation. Literally everything we do in the classroom has to tie back to these interconnected gears of teaching, curriculum, and continuous improvement. Moving right along to section 2, content versus performance standards, knowing versus doing. So to build a house, you obviously need to know the difference between reading the blueprint and actually hammering the nails. Well, in curriculum design, that's exactly the difference between content and performance standards. Content standards answer that fundamental question: what should the learners know? This is your essential knowledge, your sequential topics, the deep theory behind the electricity itself. But knowing isn't enough, is it? Especially in technical trades. That's where performance standards come in. These describe the actual abilities and skills the learners are expected to demonstrate. It's all about taking that raw knowledge and integrating 21st century skills to create, innovate, or independently install a system. You absolutely need both, but they serve very, very different purposes in your daily lesson planning. Which brings us to section 3, focus on fire alarms, quarter 3 breakdown. Let's move from that theoretical framework into a concrete, high-stakes, real-world application. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how these standards look when they're actually laid out in the official, highly bureaucratic document. Up at the top, you've got the content standard, learners demonstrating an understanding of fire detection and alarm systems, or FDAS for short. And right below it, the performance standard, learners actually performing the installation according to the Philippine Electrical Code standard. But look below that at the table. This right here is where the rubber meets the road. It's dense, it's dry, and honestly, if you just read this out loud to your students, their eyes would completely glaze over. We have to translate this grade into real action, because tucked inside that grid are the learning competencies. And for FDSA, they're actually broken down into this really beautiful, logical 3-part progression. Number 1, discuss the devices and wiring diagrams. That is your pure comprehension. Number 2, perform installation procedures. This is the hands-on psychomotor skill application. And number 3, report completion of work. Now, this is absolutely vital. In the electrical trade, communication and documentation are literally just as critical as turning the screwdriver. So these 3 competencies form the entire backbone of your quarter. But they are still way too broad for, say, a Tuesday morning lesson. And that's exactly where our next vital strategy comes into play. Let's head into section 4. Unpacking learning competencies, the bridge to the classroom. All right, listen up, because this concept is the single most important strategy in this entire explainer. I want you to think of a learning competency kind of like a tightly packed suitcase that you take on a really long trip. If you just look at the outside of the suitcase, sure, you know it's luggage, but you have no idea what you can actually wear today. Unpacking a learning competency simply means opening that suitcase. It's the process of breaking down those broad general learning goals into much more specific, highly actionable skills and knowledge. This process right here, this is the ultimate aha moment for educators because it finally lets you see exactly what pieces you have to work with, allowing you to create truly effective, aligned lessons instead of just taking a shot in the dark. And when we unpack that suitcase, we're specifically looking to extract the KSA. That stands for knowledge, understanding, skills, and attitudes. You see, every single learning activity you design needs to touch on these specific elements. What facts do they need to memorize? Well, that's the knowledge. What physical actions must they master? Those are the skills. And what safety mindset or professional demeanor must they adopt? That is the attitude. Look, if your unpacking process misses any of these, your students might know how to wire an alarm, sure, but they might not care enough to double-check their safety grounds, and we all know how important that is. Okay, let's wrap things up with Section 5, the step-by-step process, from policy to lesson plan. Let's look at the actual mechanical engine of how you do this day in and day out. We've taken the liberty of distilling the unpacking process into 5 highly reliable steps. Step 1, select the competency. Step 2, identify the key terms and verbs. Step 3, break it down into knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Step 4, write your SMART objectives. And finally, Step 5, plan your teaching strategies. Let's walk through exactly how this workflow operates so you can easily replicate it for any standard in your guide. Let's move to and see how this builds in action, starting with Steps 1 and 2. First off, you must pull the exact wording directly from the training regulation. Don't paraphrase it just yet. For example, install and maintain fire detection and alarm systems in accordance with safety regulations. Once you have that sentence, I want you to laser focus on the action verbs. In this case, install and maintain. Why? Because the verb totally dictates what the learner must be able to demonstrate. If the verb is just discuss, a written test might be totally fine. But if the verb is install, your assessment absolutely must be out in the workshop with real wires and real tools. That action verb, it's your compass. Moving to Step 3, we basically put that sentence on the operating table and dissect it. You neatly slice the competency into 3 distinct parts. First, you've got the action verb. In our example, install. Second, the content or subject matter. Here, it's fire alarm systems. And third, the purpose or standard, which is in accordance with safety regulations. By physically separating these pieces, you ensure you aren't just teaching the what and the how, but you're also teaching the to what standard. This is exactly how you keep real industry rigor intact within your classroom walls. Now for Step 4, creating your SMART objectives based on those extracted pieces. As a quick refresher, SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So, you take that super broad competency of installing a system, and you write a much tighter daily objective like, identify parts of a fire alarm system. Notice how incredibly specific that is? Notice how measurable it is? You can literally place 10 components on a table and easily grade a student's ability to correctly identify them. Boom. You just successfully translated a broad government standard into a highly measurable, actionable classroom target. And finally, we arrive at Step 5, planning teaching strategies and creating assessments. Honestly, because you just did all the heavy lifting in Steps 1 through 4, Step 5 almost writes itself. If your SMART objective is to identify parts, well, your teaching strategy might naturally be a hands-on component sorting activity, and your assessment is a quick visual identification quiz. It's brilliant because the unpacked objective cleanly and directly dictates exactly how you should teach and how you should test. There is absolutely no more guessing if your activities are actually hitting the mark. So, I want to leave you with this final, incredibly important thought as we wrap up this explainer. Look at the question we have up here. If a competency isn't unpacked, are we truly teaching the skill or just checking a box? Listen, in the electrical trades, a checked box doesn't save a life during a fire. True mastery does. Unpacking the curriculum isn't just some boring administrative paperwork. It is the fundamental, absolute core process of ensuring our students walk out of our classrooms with the precise practice skills they need to safely build our world. Thank you so much for diving deep with me today. Now, I challenge you, open up your curriculum guides tomorrow and start unpacking.